Okay, so we have another question from Spiritus Coffee. I'm wanting to roast light to bring out those sweet, juicy, fruity notes before a coffee gets too dark. I have a really hard time letting a coffee develop all the way through first crack without it getting too dark. I want the color at a place where it's usually just cracking. Let's say an Ethiopian at 395, 400 degrees. Will a higher charge temp fix this at the first outlier, cutting gas and raising air? How do you get proper post first crack development without getting dark? Oh, okay. Well, an Ethiopian, is it washed or natural? Most likely washed, right? Most of Ethiopia coffees are going to be washed most of the time. So let's start there. How I would charge this on my machine on a 1 kilogram roaster, and to drop it near first crack, like you say. And this is a really standard profile. I'll drop it in the description. I too was mistakenly thinking I was roasting it light when in fact I was really definitely roasting it very dark for that coffee to present its best qualities. But I'll break it down for you right now. So my charge is 360, which in my world that's high, whatever. I'll call it high because I tend to use 360 Fahrenheit as a charge temp whenever I have something washed or high altitude. And that gives me enough power to get to first crack at the right time and then drop at the right time and still finish with a coffee temperature around 386 to 390. So you said 395 to 400. To me, for most coffees, that temperature is getting into the medium territory. That's not always true. Like I say, everything on this channel is not always true, okay? So it's really dependent upon a lot of factors, and I'm not there with you. But when I see a finishing temp of like 395 to 400, that's getting into medium territory. When I finish a coffee very light and I want it to be juicy and I want it to be acidic, I'm actually looking for a temperature, given that I've done everything else right for this coffee, I'm looking for a temperature of like 380, even 385, which kind of freaked me out at one time, but I was like, oh, it tastes good. 385 to like 390. So just under that, just a 10 degrees under what you're looking at there, or 10 degrees under that. And that's probably why you're getting a little bit roast, getting into the medium territory when you are aiming for light, and that's exactly what I went through, was like, oh, I didn't know, like, I just always thought I had to hit 20% at the last, 18, 17, something like that, at least, at the last part of the roast. So when it was open to me, when I finally let go of like all the rules that were in my brain, because a lot of people give you a lot of rules, right? And that's not my intention. I want to give you guidelines. But when I let the cup guide me, and I was like, well, these, I'm looking for these type of flavors. So even though I've been told or I've read or whatever it is to drop at this time, I just feel like that's not going to be true for me. So when I was finally like mentally able to let that go, because you'll fight that at the roaster, like, oh, if this feels weird, like I've never done this before. And the reason why that fear and maybe anxiety comes in at play at the roaster of like, I've never, like, this sort of like, what's the big deal? I think for a roaster, you don't want to waste, right? You don't want to mess up. You don't want to waste. Also hurt your ego a bit to like mess up things, right? For sure. But if you can let all that go and just go like, well, I'm looking for this flavor. So I'm going to drop earlier. I'm going to drop earlier. And based upon my notes, I'm going to feel confident based upon my notes, right? Not from what somebody else told me who's not even here with me. You really have to make decisions based upon the evidence that's in front of you, right? So even all the stuff that I say to you guys is like, throw that out the window if it doesn't make sense for you. And that's cool with me. I'm more, I want you to find your answers, your pathway to get there, because you're the one at the roaster. I've shared my profile on how I roast my Ethiopian, and I keep it, and my intention is to keep the acidity and the juiciness and the blueberries and stuff like that. And that means for me dropping it like, it says there on my graph, 6%, 7%, something like that. And if I go beyond 8, I lose it. I lose some of that nuance, and I can taste it in the cup. So it's a charge at 360 for me, which is on the high end for me, because 350 is on the low end for me. And I really don't budge from those two. I get to my dry end around just before 5 minutes. I try to get a tight middle phase of like 3 minutes 30 for this particular coffee. And then I drop well into, maybe it's just under a minute, maybe it's like 56 seconds, something like that. It's always changing just a little bit because coffee is always changing as it sits there in your inventory. So that could become quicker as it gets older, right? So you'll have to maybe go gentler as it gets older. This coffee right here, like I'm almost out of it now, my Ethiopian here. So it's not terribly old, but it's older than, say, Pioneer that's sitting here, right? Which is my Costa Rican. So there's always this like sliding thing that's sort of happening. It's living, you know, coffee is living, coffee is life. So take all this with just starting points, guidelines. But in the end, yeah, you're going to have to make those calls. So I gave you my charge temp. Try to hit these, you know, kind of like markers for you in your roast compared to yours. Maybe roast your own, you know, your own production of it, and then roast this profile and practice like, okay, let me just try roasting this really light profile that I have there for you in the description, and then compare the two and see the taste differences that you can make. And that, I think, you can then guide and really hone in and refine your own style. Because I'm not saying for you to roast it how I roast it. I'm just giving you a starting point where like, oh, you know what, I think I like a little bit darker than that. I don't really like how this tastes or whatever. And that's all up to you, okay? So I hope that helps. Did I answer your question? Let me get into this. So will a higher charge temp fix this? You didn't tell me what you were charging at, so I don't know. I told you my charge. Okay, let's get into this. At the first outlier, cutting gas and raising air. So when I hear a first outlier, possibly, yeah. If you have too much fuel going on, I don't know what kind of machine you have, but maybe that has been done before, where you have to cut the gas. So like you have to stop the energy flow, basically, so much so that some people do turn off the gas completely. I don't really get to that point. I can almost get there, but I just don't want to, I guess, go through the motions of like igniting the flame and not having the flame on. So what I'll do is I'll turn it all the way down to like, sometimes if I'm not too careful about managing my heat up until first crack, I'll have it down to like a whisper, just like a, just like barely orange flame, waiting for my first crack to hit, right? So yeah, you can do that, and what you need to do is run those experiments, right? Take good notes and everything. Put a note on there for yourself. It doesn't have to be this full, like, taking novels of notes, but just like, okay, this one, gas 1%, 2%, whatever it is, right? Until you find a good rhythm or a good pattern. What did you say about air? Cutting gas and raising air. Yeah, the raising air part. So what I typically do, to flush any of that potential smoke that could, taint the cup. On the first outlier, what I do is I'll slightly raise the air. I won't max it out, but I'll slightly raise it. And depending on the behavior of the ROR curve, so if I see it, and the temperature and all the things that you're preparing for when you're approaching your first crack, so depending on how fast or how slow I'm approaching that landmark for first crack, I can do a couple of things. So yes, I can turn the heat down way low so I don't spike up right before I hit first crack. So I can turn the heat down way low. I can slightly increase my air and see how that affects the ROR curve, because the ROR curve is telling me how fast or slow I should go. Okay? So based upon that ROR, there's still all those other things. There's still temperature, there's still the look of the beans, there's still all of that, but my main primary like flag in the air of like what to do is the ROR curve for me. And that's just how I kind of was taught, you know. And then from there, I'll start hearing my outliers, and then however you call first crack, just be consistent with it, whether it's a pop or it's a pop 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 or whatever, however you call first crack. And that is not always going to be true for every coffee. So I used to always be like, do I wait for the solid pop pop pop? And some coffees will give you that. They're giving you a nice solid pop pop pop. Maybe that's a nice washed coffee that you have roasted not slow. Not fast, but not slow. Okay, and it gives you that nice pop. But some coffees don't give that to you. So your definition of how you call first crack for particular coffees can also change. This coffee roasting. But you'll learn, right? As you keep roasting, and you know, you'll start to see those patterns in the matrix. Don't worry about it right now, okay? But so whenever you call first crack, what I do is I crank the air first, maxed out air, and then even though I'm not getting an aggressive crack yet, I just crank it anyway, because I'm preparing for it. And then I'm gonna watch my ROR. I'm gonna watch that curve, and if it starts to plummet or go down fast, because, and this is my style because of my machine is powerful, right? If I want power, I can get power. Now, if you have a machine that's not as responsive in your fuel, doesn't have a fast fuel response, then you'll need to make those adjustments. But how I do it, because my machine has like 20,000 BTUs in it, I can just crank that guy. If I see that ROR plummeting, I can crank that all the way back up to 2.5 or whatever it is to help it out. And after I've done it a couple times, I've already developed, you know, like a preemptive. I know the patterns in the matrix for this coffee, so I can be preemptive about my fuel. And so I'll do that, you know. But I'm using that ROR to tell me and to let me know, and it's waving a flag to me saying more heat, less heat, things like that. Okay, so I'm watching that, and then the next steps in determining when it's done is I'm looking at the coffee, I'm looking at the finishing temperature, I'm looking at the time on the last part of the roast. So I'm looking at all that stuff for sure. But my first indicator for me is that ROR curve. So just to hit the point home further, I'm going to show you an Ethiopian coffee here at a very light roast. And just like what you, I think, want to do is drop this coffee right at first crack. So let's talk about heat management only throughout this whole roast, okay? So I'm going to charge at 360 degrees. Full batch. By the way, this is a 1 kilogram roaster on gas. Now remember, my machine is very powerful, so I have that responsiveness. At 100%, my machine is at 2.5 kPa full power, okay? So I'll let you know what my fuel inputs are percentage-wise as we move along here. So charge, I'm at full power. I've preheated a good 20 minutes before. And I charge the coffee, and then I wait for a turning point, and I'm still at full power. And then that is marked here at 146. At dry end or green to yellow transition, we're at 4 minutes 46 at about 300 degrees. At that time, I will increase the air to medium, or 50 on my dial, which is a medium airflow. Then I will decrease my fuel to about maybe like 52%. I put it on this mark right here. 52% fuel, okay, at dry end. And I increase the air to medium. Okay, so this is the tricky part, the middle phase.
depending on the behavior of this curve, and I want it to go steadily down. I don't want it to go up or down or too much, right? So as this goes down and I'm watching this curve, I am slowly lowering this heat. And right before I'm getting to, I'm trying to like have them match up, right? So I'll be approaching what I think is a typical first crack with time and temperature. And my fuel should be kind of way down here. 1%, 2%, something like that. And because I can't see exactly what's on this gauge, I'll look at the flame itself. So I can minutely turn the valve and I could see the size of that flame. So I could really see how much fuel is being applied, right? Because I can't really see those minuscule adjustments on this gauge, but I can see that with the size of the flame. Okay, so I'll do that. I'll come way down right before this because I'm about to reach my first crack temp, which is typically for me it's a little different, I think, with every machine, but with me, I typically will hit it 374 to 376. So if I'm not seeing that temperature and hitting them around 8 minutes 30, 8 minutes 40, something like that. If I'm not seeing those markers, I did something wrong over here, potentially. We always just say potentially because we can't verify it's right or wrong until we cup it, okay? As always, if we're letting the cup kind of guide us. And then when I do hit first crack or hear an outlier or I want to call first crack on this coffee, which is a typical good, pop, pop, pop for me on this washed Ethiopian, I increase the air first. And depending on the curve, I can increase it a little bit. Like I'm hearing outliers. Okay, let's give it a little help. It all really depends on if I'm hitting all these markers and I feel that first crack is approaching at the right time and temperature. Sorry, it's just like that. It's kind of not a clear answer. And then when I've got a full first crack on my hands, I hit the button, I increase the air all the way to max. And then depending on the curve, like I say, I can crank up my fuel to about maybe 1, keep it there, or I can keep it wherever it's at. I typically will increase it back to 1. Which is like 30%, 1 or 30% right here. And then from here, I can slowly adjust up or down, again, depending on the curve. But I have about less than a minute to kind of make decisions because I know I got to drop this coffee pretty light. So again, depending on my curve, I want to keep this kind of right here. I can slowly come back down again as I ride out this crack. Okay. So again, this is my indicator, what I should do here. At the same time, I'm still monitoring the coffee, this number, and all that stuff. Okay, but this is my first indicator. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of since we don't have at the roaster B-roll or example, but that's what I do. All right, Nick? Hope that makes sense. Okay.
Start there first, change one thing at a time, and see if that actually did it. And then if you feel confident at the roaster that you charged higher and now you want to do different things, just make sure you take good notes so that you know what you did. If you do charge higher and you want confirmation that it worked, you want to look at a couple of things. You can look at, did you turn around faster? Did you hit dry end faster? And that can be a confirmation without waiting to do another roast to change another thing in your roast plan, right? So if you turned around quicker and if you hit dry end at a better time, not past 5 minutes, then I think you're clear to make another change in your roast plan. Without losing too much. But again, this is all conjecture. And I'm just trying to give you, again, you said your thoughts. I want to give you my thoughts, a thorough thought process of what I would do. Okay? So start there and get back to me, Nick, and Let me know how it goes. And then when you guys send me questions, you're like, should I do this? Should I do that? Tell me what you've already done. That way I have context. Otherwise, like, I'm going to just speak in, like, general terms. So the more specific you can be, like, I think that'll help me give you a better specific answer. Okay? Cool. So that's it. That was long. See you in the next one. Bye.